We're closely following the looming threat of a major Russian invasion after Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered troops into two separatist regions of Ukraine. President Biden has already called Putin's actions the beginning of a Russian invasion into Ukraine. And Phil, you're just a few hours from one of the busiest border crossings between Poland and Ukraine.
Yeah, Diane, about 60 miles to the east of where we are here in Lublin is one of the busiest border crossings in all of Poland on the border with Ukraine. And this area becomes very important should Vladimir Putin decide to make a full-scale invasion into Ukraine. That would push tens of thousands of Ukrainians toward the border here in Poland. It would cause a refugee crisis, which is why we have thousands of U.S. troops here on the ground in Poland. More on that in a minute. But first, there were some major and concerning developments, Diane, overnight and into today here in the region. First, a dire warning from Ukraine's military. We just learned that key members of parliament have been briefed that the military expects the situation in the eastern part of the country to deteriorate dramatically over the next 2 days. That's from the military. According to sources, 4 sources familiar with the briefing, the fear is Russia may launch a major attack on 2 cities beyond eastern Ukraine. One, the second largest city in Ukraine, which is about 20 miles from the Russian border, and then a city in the south near Crimea, which Vladimir Putin already annexed back in 2014. This is all after the state of emergency was declared by President Zelensky, and the military has been ordered to call up reservists 18 to 60 years of age, many with combat training. President Zelensky says not to fight right now, but that the country is on a heightened sense of alert because, Diane, they just simply don't know what Russia's going to do next.
And we are covering every angle of this crisis. So, Phil, stay with me. I also want to bring in foreign correspondent James Longman in Moscow, White House correspondent Mary Alice Parks in D.C., and ABC News contributor Darrell Blocker, the former CIA deputy director of counterterrorism, for more on this. And Darrell, I'd like to start with you. Ukraine's government says a new cyber attack has hit several of its government ministries, knocking their websites offline. What does that tell you? And is this going to be another kind of warfare that's happening in the background of what we're seeing militarily?
Absolutely. It's probably one of the new modern warfare where no lives have to be lost, where they can take down entire networks, where they can sow dissension, confusion. So that is, along with the disinformation program that's already been launched as long as 8 years ago when they annexed the Crimea.
Mary Alice, how is the U.S. likely to respond if Russia does go ahead and attack areas outside of these separatist regions?
Yeah, Diane, that would be that kind of major escalation that the White House has been warning about. I would assume the White House would respond by lobbying the biggest, most forceful sanctions that they still have available to them. You know, things they've been talking about, like potentially sanctioning Putin himself, import-export sanctions, moves on Russian banks. I mean, they have threatened to bring sanctions that would be crippling, would be so costly, unlike anything we've seen before. We've seen them starting to ratchet up towards that, but if Putin were to attack major Ukrainian cities outside that eastern Donbass region, that's the kind of move that would trigger sort of the biggest, heaviest sanctions from the U.S. government.
And James, Russia is warning that U.S. sanctions will be met with a strong response. What do you think that means?
In sort of typical fashion, a threat, but not very clear what it actually means. There's been a lot of bluster today about these sanctions. They have been saying that, you know, Russia has been sanction-proofing its economy for months and years. I remember a couple of months ago there was talk about how everyone should be buying Russian cheese because you might not be able to get French cheese anymore, but obviously an economy can't run on cheese. But this is just part of the way that Russia deals with these things. It likes to insult the West rather than, you know, give any kind of real answer. I should say that, you know, Maria Zakharova, the spokesperson here in the Foreign Ministry, who likes to give pretty insulting public commentary, she's been speaking today, and she's been basically saying that sanctions would have happened anyway. It doesn't matter what Russia does. And it's just part of the narrative that this is just par for the course with dealing with the West, that Russia will be the eternal enemy of the West and there's nothing that it can do other than defend itself. So it's been basically readying its people for the possibility that life will just start to get more and more expensive. I mean, it's debatable whether or not sanctions ever work anyway. I mean, a lot of these sanctions will hit individuals with a lot of money. So yes, travel bans will obviously impact them, but when it comes to their money, I mean, mean, you know, it's quite actually difficult with very rich people. When you're thinking about billionaires, they can hide their money pretty easily and get around these things. So, and a lot of the time, countries often don't implement them as hardly as they say they're going to do. And Russia kind of knows that. But over and above it, you know, Russia just enjoys the debate around these things because it just solidifies the image they can portray to their own people here in the country that the West is out to get them.
And Phil, you mentioned a potential refugee crisis. What kind of plans is Poland putting into place in the event this does escalate?
Well, Diane, there are plans. They're not being released publicly, but this is what we do know. The U.S. has sent nearly 5,000 troops here to Poland, 82nd Airborne Division, and they have been working very closely with the Polish authorities and the military and the police along the border. As I said, Lublin, where I am, is about 60 miles from one of the busiest border crossings for Ukraine into Poland. And if the scenario that Mary Alice was laying out actually comes to fruition, it would push tens of thousands of Ukrainians this way toward Poland, and then these border crossings, 8 of them up and down the border, would become very important. What happens to the Ukrainians who are trying to come into Poland? Are they all of them allowed in? If they are, where do they go? Those plans have not been released, but our military, at least 5,000 members of them, have been working on what to do if that scenario happens. And with the increased tensions and the sanctions that James is talking about, it's looking more and more like that may be possible by the day. Diane?
Now, those U.S. troops that have been deployed to neighboring countries, do we know yet what their role will be? Phil?
Well, we know what their role won't be, for sure. President Biden has said these troops are not going to fight in any way, shape, or form. He's even said they're not going in to Ukraine to rescue U.S. citizens, that they will need to come here. And there is a plan for U.S. citizens once they get to Poland. But we do know they are here to assist in what could be a major refugee crisis.
And Daryl, Russian-controlled separatists are claiming 2 large terrorist attacks, in their words, took place in the territory last night. So how do intelligence agencies know what's a false flag and what isn't? And how do they counter misinformation and disinformation right now?
Unfortunately, time is the major factor, because verification of these events is fairly easy over a 24, 72-hour period. But when people have to make decisions and react on, is it something that's going to happen right now, mistakes can be made. Terrorist attack, who initiated it, who was injured, who was behind it, all of that is taken into account. So if Putin is using that as a reason for going in, there's nothing that we can do to stop him from doing that if he's launching tanks. But and then, of course, after the fact, no one's going to care that it was fake.
And James, Russia is facing more sanctions by the day from other European countries. We know Vladimir Putin said that they've been kind of sanction-proofing their economy, as you mentioned. But, I mean, if enough of these pile on, could this change Putin's course?
It doesn't feel like it. Yeah, we've had the European Union now say that they are now sanctioning every single member of the Duma, the Russian parliament, that voted to recognize the independence of these 2 separatist regions of eastern Ukraine. A number of members of the inner circle, Maria Zakharova, who I just spoke to you about, she's on the sanctions list. A number of very, very rich members of Vladimir Putin's inner circle. It does feel, though, that it's a trajectory which is difficult for him to come back from. And I should tell you, though, Diane, that the sense here in Moscow, it's very difficult to read, because one minute people think, oh, there's no way he's going to invade our neighbor Ukraine. And the next, there's a moment which makes people really think, actually, he means business. And, you know, there's been a few of these moments over the last few days. The vote in the parliament to allow Russia to go to a foreign country, the Russian army to invade a foreign country. That was a big, big moment. That was the same law that was passed in 2014 where the army annexed Crimea. So there have been these moments that have terrified people, and I don't think sanctions at this point are going to make much difference, but who knows. Dan?
And Mary Alice, the European Union and NATO have both said that Russia moved forces into Ukraine. Now, President Biden stopped short of saying that exactly. Why are we seeing so much focus on the language used to describe what's happening right now?
Yeah, Dan, because they're trying to decide what should trigger new sanctions, and they want to make sure partners and allies are making those decisions together. White House sources have been telling us for weeks that they think sanctions only have a chance at changing Putin's calculus if they are done together in a really coordinated fashion. You know, I really agree with James that it's hard to imagine sanctions at this point changing Putin's calculus, but it was interesting that Ukraine's foreign minister today went again to the UN, and he said he does still think there's a chance. If sanctions are tough enough, if the political messaging is tough enough, he still thinks that the pressure from the international community can sway the Kremlin. But of course, if we actually start to see that worst case scenario, really an attack on major Ukrainian cities outside that eastern region, the whole world is going to be asking what else the West should have done besides just sanctions.
All right, James Longman, Mary Alice Parks, Darryl Blocker, and Phil Lipoff, thank you all.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.